Thank you, Marco, for inviting me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to University of Suffolk. It's always nice to speak at home. Marco and I, we know that you're invited everywhere, but at home it's so hard to actually get to speak and to get listened to. So it's really a pleasure. How to put that? I thought this morning would be horrible for me. Because I really have no idea about sports sciences. You know, I know about sports psychology, but the rest I thought, oh my God, this is going to be horrendous. I don't know if you ever noticed that. This is something that I really find interesting. When we go to conferences and you look into a program, you never look at the things you don't know. You always go to the things, to the expositions, to the posters, which are your topic. So you pay 500 quid, travel across Europe, go to a place with huge amounts of knowledge, and people have the tendency to go and listen and see what they already know. So I did change my point of view. I said, I really want to listen. Now I want to know and I want to learn about the things I don't know, and I actually enjoyed this morning very much. So now this is payback time. I don't know how many sports psychs are here in this room, but I guess not that many. And I'm going to take you into my world, and I hope that you can appreciate that just the way that I appreciated what I heard this morning and probably what I'm going to hear this afternoon. And I'm going to talk about PsychMapping, but I want to start somewhere else, and this is another reflection that I have. I guess we all love sports. We all like sports. We're interested in sports. Possibly you all practice sports in your youth, just like I did. I was a professional tennis player, almost. You can't really see that now, but I was really fit. And I spend as much time in the gym as anyone. I just hated it, like more than anyone else. And when I had the chance to do sports sciences, I just went to psychology. I said much more sitting, more girls, to be really honest. That was like my priority list number one. And that's where our ways deviated. But we all love sports and we're interested in sports. We want to understand sport. Is that right? I think that's something that we all share. Now I want to make a reflection linked to what I said at the beginning. Imagine this black circle is everything we know about sports. This is all the things that we like, all the things we're interested in. And that's how we start. That's what, before you go and study, it's like, I want to do something related to sport. Maybe you study sports sciences. My students, they choose sports sciences, performance analysis. And you go in there and, well, you choose a part that you can study. I don't study sports science. I have no idea about biomechanics. I have no idea about strength and conditioning. Start sports sounds great. I have no idea what it's about. Just a lot of arrows and, looks good. Looks good. But I decided something else, just like you. You decide to study a part of what you're interested in. So I studied psychology. Maybe some of you studied sports sciences. Maybe some of you studied economics. Maybe some of you went into medicine. Maybe some of you went into education. Then you spend a couple of years focusing on that part of what you're interested in. Well, you still keep in mind sports and what I'm interested, but you start narrowing down your focus until you choose possibly a master's. I guess most of you, well, besides students, you're going to focus on a master's. You can't see it because our greatest projector in the big conference room is yellow. But okay, that's just, But you folks, you chose a master's degree, something, a part of everything. So if you do sports sciences and you say, I'm going to do a master's in sports coaching or in physio or in readaptation, and you're going to spend another year studying this smaller part of what you're interested in. And then you find your topic. Maybe you want to do a PhD, you start doing a literature review, and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to study, hamstring injuries, or GPS, or inertial devices. Or I said, I study cognitive self-regulation. And then you study that, you do your literature review, you read dozens, hundreds of papers until you get your thesis, your research question, and then you deliver, you create your big contribution to science, which is your PhD. And now you know so much and you want to explain it to people. You want to go, you burst into the room of a head coach saying, I found something out. And you know what you find out? Nobody really cares. Why is that? Well, partly because that thing that you know so much about is an infinite part of what you were initially interested in. Okay. And that is something that happened to me. I'm going to present to you today what is called SYMPOSIUM. Originally, I'm a self-talk researcher, so in a dialogue. And I'm pretty good. I can say that. I'm not a very confident person, but I'm really, really good at that. But I just found that out. I wrote a book about it. Nobody reads it, but I wrote a book. Well, you find that out. Scientific publishing is not about anyone reading it. Nobody reads it. That's not the point. The point is publishing it. Okay, I can't go well for a long time, but it's going well for now. So we publish, nobody reads. We get more promotions, nobody reads. You know, we write books, nobody reads. Well, that's okay. For now, it works. I abandoned my specific research topic because, in essence, it couldn't solve not even 1% of the problems that I find in everyday work with athletes. And that's when I said, I need to change something. I need to understand. I had to go back, step backwards, leave my comfort zone, and ask something more global. You know, look at the black circle again. Try and understand people and their behavior and sport performance. Because one cannot. And I really liked, Alex, when you explained this morning, you can't predict performance. You can't, I can't, no one can, but together, considering, integrating viewpoints, we can get closer. And part of what psych mapping is that it is a theory that integrates different parts of knowledge. And when I say a theory, most people think, okay, well, theories are nice. I mean, you study them in the university, especially in your first year, and then you forget about them and you learn everything about application. Application without understanding is useless. It is the knowledge that we have, the understanding of the problem, the predictions we can make that make the interventions that we use actually impactful. We need to know. Our interventions, most of ours, mine in psychology, some of yours in sports coaching, they're simple. It's not heart surgery. You put cones and pass a ball, and I ask people questions. Anyone can do that. But asking the right question and putting the right distance between cones is something that only comes from a deep understanding of what is happening. And in that sense, I started to get away from the application and going to understanding and find a theory that is an applied tool. And I'm going to explain to you not the theory itself, I mean, it's payback time, but not at that depth, but what we actually achieved from this university worldwide using an integrative holistic theory explaining people and their behavior. The practical applications that are coming from that. So, on a very, very simple perspective, in a flowery fashion, this is the theory. I'm not going to go into it, but it basically integrates an athlete's environment, an athlete's descriptive traits, how they're built, their momentary experiences, and two processes that are very important to understand. One is the input of information from the environment, and the other one is called self-regulation. I'm not going to go into in any detail, but I want to prove to you that it is a psychology-based theory because we are psychologists. You can't abandon the person you are, but you can't consider the limitations of your knowledge. So what we started to do is look into how can we create that model that integrates different sciences. So I'm just going to look at one thing just to give you an example of the multidisciplinarity of what we do. Descriptive traits is what describes who a person is. Any descriptive trait can be used to the question, who are you? Yeah, they're relatively stable and they identify, in theory, how you're doing. And of course, there are psychological traits like personality, self-esteem, identity, sport motivation. Yes, I can describe myself in those terms. There are some social traits which are fairly psychological. Probably in a sports team that would still come under my remit, where we have something like extroversion, communicative style, you know, different people have different ways of talking, leadership style, leadership predispositions, you know, that some athletes they are natural born leaders, some athletes, they are completely autocrats, and some athletes would be democrats, you don't know. Leadership predispositions, okay. But then if we leave those psychological and social, we go into this multidisciplinary area. People can be defined by physical traits. Physical traits that go from height. Well, my examples are simple because I don't know about biomechanics, but it's height, it's weight, bone structure, but you have everything you talk about when you speak about developing athletes. All the traits on a biomechanic, on a physical level would enter this area. Also, people can be described by their skills. So if you're a sports coach and you develop an athlete, Ben can become the athlete who's very good at passing long balls. How do you identify Ben? By that skill. Or Anna is very good in making decisions in small spaces. You can define a person by tactical skills, by their experiences. And those, they are not built by me, they are built by you. Large parts of what describes a person has nothing to do with my area of work, has everything to do with your area of work. And then there's also habits and so on. Well, the only thing I want to show you is we have a model, and it's a multidisciplinary model. It is psychology based, so you probably need somebody from psychology to understand really the model. If you as a physio would probably build a different model, including the psychological variables to support those that are more familiar to you, but it is still multidisciplinary. Now, what is the difference here? What have we done? Why is this theory so important? Until now, I have no idea how much experience you have with sports psychologists. Sports psychologists went into an area and they had measurement instruments. They're like a compass. They can always orientate you in that moment towards your goals. Where am I going? Am I going north? Am I going south? But every part of the step you need to re-measure where you are if you're on the right course. So you can't really plan ahead with a compass. How are you going to do that? I'm going to walk north and then at some point I'm going to turn east. I have no idea where. You don't have any reference points. So what we have now with that theory is a map. We call our theory, it's like a transport map, showing everything that is important and every part that we have to look at creating elite athletes. From the physical environment they need, to the training structure they need, to the personality traits they have to develop, the social traits they need to develop, to the habits they need, life skills they need to develop, their self-regulation, up to the very point where we speak about the states, which is how our athletes are in the moment of performing. And that really changes the way we see psychology. It changes so much that psych mapping today is a community. It started being an idea, it started being a theory, it started being something applied. Today it's an international community. We have over 80 applied sports psychologists working with us in some really high-level, high-profile sports. I can't really compete with what I've seen this morning about people you work with. I really don't. But I am still proud that in the past it's just been a year and a half that we started this project. We right now apply the framework of psych mapping within Europe. I didn't put all the clubs, but a lot in Spain. Some clubs should be more famous. Bilbao is playing first division. If you're a Manchester United fan, you will still remember Villarreal. I'm a Bayern Munich fan. I also remember Villarreal, the nightmare. Anyway, basketball, Girona, it's first division basketball. And then we have people from the community working at high-level clubs. We have loads of people in South America. I have a Spanish-speaking background. Everything we do it duolingual. And while it is very hard for us to actually gain traction in the UK, don't ask me why, internationally we're really successful. So that's a bit the setup. We have a theory. Now what do we do? What does psych mapping offer people who are not sports psychologists? I take for granted most people here are not sports psychologists. If you were, my presentation would be much more into the detail of the theory. But I want you to understand what is it that we do and what is it where sports psychology generally is headed towards. So the initial idea psych mapping had, and I'm not going to go too much into it, it's exploratory interviewing. Take somebody you don't know, spend 45 minutes to an hour and create a visual representation of who that person is. Not on a physical level, on a psychological level. And in that sense, we have a certain exercise. You practice that exercise to get in a one-on-one session. We have it published, but what comes out is a visual representation of key aspects that are important to explaining and to understanding an athlete. Here you have a person who's practicing physical activity, and in different color codes you can identify facilitators and barriers to physical activity. We have that in elite sports, we have that in physical activity, we have that in other health behaviors, and it's quite easy, for example, to understand that long competitive working environment, line managers and long hours of driving are barriers to taking up physical activity for weight loss, just as an example. Now you can see that high cholesterol, unhappy body image are also problems they have anyway. That is very nice, and we use that. Club that most used is Villarreal Football Club. It is possibly the institution with most sports psychologists. They have, I think it's 12 full-time sports psychologists in the academy. They have a very curious way of working. Because I think before the Ipswich town presentation was interesting. They actually meet every day, the whole staff, and they do prepare training sessions together with S&C coaches, the 2 head coaches, and sports psychologists. Sometimes they bring in nutritionists and so on. So that's a pretty nice environment. Anyway, the problem here is it's not really applicable large scale. It is working for one-on-one sessions, and we have many people. We have a CPD course, which we have right now, I think about 80 people also enrolled doing that. People take it up, sports psychologists take it up. A lot of nutritionists love this because, you know, they created all their nutritionist routine, which nobody followed. It is very useful, and you don't need to be a sports psychologist to complete it. So that's one good thing. But large scale, it's very hard to apply. So what we have done from here on is looking wider. Why? Because mental health in sport has become a priority, not only for athletes, but for institutions, for clubs. We work with clubs who have hundreds of athletes. And you need to take care, from the junior athletes to their elite teams, aspects about mental health. Because if something happens, it's not only the personal responsibility, it's an institutional one, because you get into the spotlight. And we are asked, okay, you do these interviews for an hour. We can't apply an interview 3 times a year with 300 athletes. It's not plausible. So what I want to present to you, which is a bit the direction we're going, is a new development. So basically, because Marco invited me, I wanted to give something back. I'm going to explain to you and show you what the future looks like in this sense. And the future isn't an individual interview. It is a screening tool that allows me to identify individuals within my institution, within my sports club, from the highest to the lowest level, that actually need individual support. So tentatively, we call it psych screening. We're still developing loads of it. So we have done the first test from September till now, and we're going to enter 3 professional football clubs in April, Villarreal, Bilbao, and the club in Tarragona in Spain. All Spain, just I don't have to translate that much. It's just me being lazy, nothing cultural. What it is, you have a coach who can program a screening exercise on the phone. Basically, it's an app. You download an app, you get a message, your coach has programmed the screening exercise. You can program it right now. Many coaches who used it in the basketball professional club, training was over, they took out their phones, saying, everybody bring your phones. I just asked you to do a screening exercise, 5 to 10 minutes. Players answer a couple of questions about different influences in their performance and their well-being as athletes. You have a list of athletes. It's quite simple to implement. What you get out is immediately you get different types of reports. What you see here, these are player reports. The actual app looks a bit different, but since we're developing it, my team just said, why don't you come up with something that looks like it? We don't share it yet. So what you have here is an individual report with all the aspects this athlete has evaluated. It's a subjective evaluation, but this is psychology. You know, there is no objective truth. Can you imagine somebody asks you, how are you doing? You're like, I'm really tired. Well, yeah, I have a measure that says that you're actually all right, so don't complain. No, that doesn't go. That's not. Psychology is by definition subjective. And using an object doesn't convert it into an objective measure. It's still a subjective one, supported by So here you have an athlete, and you can see very good evaluations of external influences, the club, the teammates, the coaches. But for example, that athlete's school was a big problem, and the lack of psychological support. You're going to see some aspects that describe the athlete. You can see his motivation, his sense of belonging. Some things about technique, physical preparation are pretty positive aspects, but right away his emotions stand out as a big negative influence on his performance. And not surprisingly, if you look at their self-regulation, he has quite a lot of awareness, which is okay, but then emotion control is a big no or big problem in his development. He gets a score. There are 4 different scores, 3 suggested, recommended and urgent, which indicate to what degree that person should see a sports psychologist. The club has 3 sports psychologists who have a list. You're going to see them now. They can approach the athlete. The athlete can share this information, and right away they can start working targeted on one of the skills he needs to develop. You have different other measures, so you can compare this person rates external factors more than internal ones. Other athletes are the other way around. And you can also see a development over time, seeing how the athlete got worse over the past year. This is the really important bit, because this is the group report. That's what the coach receives. Coaches don't receive individual reports because of confidentiality, but they get a list, and that is the important one. You get a list where you immediately identify what athletes need support and what athletes are fine. So this coach right away knows that Mark and Tobias need that support. So he calls the sports psych, says, why don't you come down to training, just have a chat with them and see where it goes. Even if you don't have a sports psychologist in the club, which happens very often, you can use those informations to signpost parents and athletes to relevant contacts you have in your area. So you start taking control over what is happening. You also have the evaluations of the coach. I'm going to go into that. The coach also answers about his team, gives him some valuable information. The other thing that coaches rate very much, this is the summary page. So you're going to get the best and worst evaluated categories by your athletes. So you can see that. But the most very important thing is this down here. Most of you will work without support of sports psychologists, and still sports psychology will impact the quality of your work. So you can prepare an athlete 100%, and some of the things that will happen have nothing to do with you. It's based on athletes' decision-making, athletes' personality, athletes' emotions. Take into consideration that what we calculate, we have several indexes. We calculate the urgency to which a coaching team without sports psychologists should address certain aspects. So if an aspect is under your control, you have more tendency to have to focus on it. So technique, immediately, if it's not perfect, this should be a priority. Emotions, even if it is very bad, isn't really your remit, so the priority will lower. So for this athlete, decision-making is really urgent. Decision-making is to a large degree under the remit of sports coaching, so they need to turn to that. Emotions, emotion control, which are terrible for the team, they are still a priority, but less urgent because it's not really your work. You should have somebody who works that with you. And then, for example, technique is a priority, although it's quite good. Why? Because it's just your work, it's just your job. We have also information for a club level. So once every team in the club has completed it, the club owner or management can ask for information. So they can ask for a report for their whole club. So for example, this I did express it in percentages just for confidentiality reasons. In this club, we know that 5% of all athletes need urgent consultation. That doesn't mean there's a mental health issue. It just means that this is somebody who really needs that attendance, that training in psychological aspects. And then you have 9%, for example, recommended, and the rest are relatively fine. It's a normal distribution. You can also, as a club member or club owner, compare different teams. Here you have all the teams in the club, and there's a quite typical thing that professional teams are all right. The kids are great, kids are usually great. If we adults don't mess up, kids are great. Give them a ball, they're going to be happy. But then adolescence is just a pain in the ass, and you can just see it here. Another thing that you can ask, what we calculate, is for specific variables that the club, as a club, can take responsibility for. You can see a comparison. So you can see the club image is very good. The training is valued very high. Coaches, relatively high. S&C training, not that high. Facilities, relatively low. and psych preparation the lowest. So as a club owner, I can take decisions about where I'm going to invest money on a club level for further improvement. So what we have a quick online completion of a screening exercise. It gives confidential individual reports, so psychologists need to ask the athletes for permission. A lot of times the athletes come with their results, shared with the psychologist, sometimes even with the coach, and it right away leads to interesting conversations. We calculate the need support index. It's calculated on the weight of everything we evaluate. So saying that you're terrible in mental health is much more important than saying you're terrible in decision making in your sport. So it is all weighted to the relevance of different variables. You can do coach-athlete comparisons and see where there might be misunderstandings from the coach's perspective and the player's perspectives. There's a coach priority suggestion index which tells coaches that don't have a sports psychologist how much importance they should give to psychological variables. Just giving a lot of importance, for example, to parents is a waste of time because you can't control or change parents. So we give that information and then it creates those club overview reports. Just a couple of comments. For athletes, it's always great to see information and understand themselves and get some clarity. This is from a professional athlete who has actually won international championships, and he still says, "I've big tangle in my mind. Seeing those things clearly helps me a lot in working on myself." For the coach, he used a lot as a planning tool. I liked that this morning when you explained that. The first analysis helps you to plan and then monitor. So they used that first map, said, during this season, where do we want to improve? They did the screening again 2 months later and monitorized progress where they had to invest more time and more efforts. And then from a club owner perspective, it was this, finally, I have something that I can use and I can be sure I identify people who actually need support. Instead of having 300 kids run around where I have no idea on a psychological level what needs they have. That club owner basically says, we need this alongside medical checks at the beginning of the season. It's not a big thing. It's not an intervention. It's a bit like what we've seen this morning. It's not an intervention. It is the information you need, what you base your interventions on. So generally I say anyone who's interested, you can join. We have collaborators, we have clients and we have collaborators, so you have some of them here. Individuals can do the course and learn about it, and organizations are absolutely welcome to talk about partnerships. We have applied partnerships, for example with Villarreal, and we have a lot of university partnerships in Germany, in the States, in Norway, in Greece. That's just some of them. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I hope that made sense and you enjoy the rest of the day.
Alex, for your presentation. So this time I'd like to start with a question. So I will give you the ability to ask a question later. So my question is this one. If you think of sports science in the past, or football in general, clubs were spending money before on football coaches. After they understood that maybe some money could go also in strength conditioning, monitoring, etc., etc. You showed before that psychology, from a psychological perspective, there is less investment. In your opinion, why don't clubs invest in psychology as maybe as they should?
Oh yeah, it's easy. Humans are stupid. Take Paris. Paris is a good example. So let's spend 50 million and not win. Let's spend 100 million, not win. Let's spend 150 million, not win. I can go on like this because stupidity is infinite. There are two things which are infinite in the universe. Well, the universe and stupidity, which Einstein said the first one we're not sure about yet. It's basically that. We lose because of human error. We make mistakes. We have all the information. We prepare our athletes. We give them all the training. We have all the tactics. And then, you know, like Mitrovic, they just push off the referee and get sent off. And you're like, well, in hell did Stat Sports or any other collect that? Where's stupidity in all those measurements? And you have that on a club level. I don't understand it. I actually wrote a piece for a newspaper, and I don't know when Paris lost the Champions League. And I just said, there has been revolutions in football, a technical revolution, a tactical revolution, a fitness revolution, a monetary revolution. At some point, there's going to be a psychological one in where we have to prepare athletes to actually perform at the level that we have prepared them to perform, because they consistently underperform. That's just my answer.
Thank you very much. So let's open the floor to other questions. Any one of you would like to ask a question to Alex?
There was a slide about evaluating the club just before. Have you evaluated every environment of the club? Ipswich club, SNC, psychological preparation?
Yeah, the clubs and the coaches can choose different versions of this app. So the complete version evaluates quite a lot of indicators within the club. The cost is it's longer. It's just that. So you can evaluate your coach, your S&C coach, the training, the strength and conditioning training, the technology in the club, physical environment, location, weather, climate. You can analyze loads of things. Many people keep that short. But yes, if you're a club owner and you say, I want to pay specific attention to some aspects, you can. And then now we're creating an individualized version for MotoGP, because they have completely different environmental impacts than a football club would have. So we do that then for specific clients. Some clients use, for example, a very short version and use that as a player preparation tool. So like an hour before a game, every player goes on their phone, answers questions, and you get an idea of where they stand, how well they're prepared, if there's anyone who might not be prepared to play. So there's different versions that you can create. Yeah.
Yes, please.
That was great, Thank you very much. Are you beginning to see anything around how teammates or teams are built, and how sort of different personalities, for want of a better phrase, help create a more successful team rather than just by Neymar, just by Messi?
Oh yeah. Well, with this, we haven't studied Neymar with this. I'd have a picture. I mean, it looks so cool. I could take any picture of Neymar on a phone and just say that's it, but I'm not that good at lying. What we know, so you would use this to identify that team structure is a problem. And you identify that because you have huge variability within the team of the evaluation of teammates and team dynamics. And what you do then, so if you get that as a coach, you can work on it because you're humans. I mean, psychology, everybody treats psychology and you can do your best. If I get into a team where we have a problem with team structure, then we do a targeted intervention on that. This one identifies the problem. The solution is either handmade, if you don't have a professional working with you. If you have a professional and they're competent, which is not always the case, then it's when you develop specific interventions. So you can't do that with the players you have, and sometimes it is literally getting somebody away from a team. So we've done that. We've recommended the team to get rid of one of their star players for balance, and it worked. Well, there are plenty of examples of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. So